So how is this all organized and financed? The honest answer, no one knows exactly. The ideas we have discussed come from a few libertarian thinkers, but on the OboxPlanet there are thousands of companies constantly working on improving the solutions. Our goal is simply to show private security is possible, and it's an exciting idea to explore. Now, before we show how private security is solved, there is the question, why should it be solved? Why are people interested in security? What do you think is the main reason? Security is the precondition for freedom. Without security, there is no freedom, not even for bad people. Even burglars want safe streets, and even they lock the doors before they go out to rob others. And where there is a demand, there is a business solution. Security firms centered around the insurance business offer contracts to protect life and property. Let's call these contracts PeacePasses. And I would argue that almost everyone on the OboxPlanet has a PeacePass, with the exception of some hermits or some criminals who can no longer get a contract. Here are some reasons. 1. The PeacePass is nothing new. It is simply an extension of contracts for security and protection that most people already have today. For example, we already have liability insurance, theft insurance, legal protection, or disability coverage. 2. You need a PeacePass for many everyday activities because it gives everyone security and trust. Why? When someone signs a PeacePass, they commit in writing to peaceful behavior. No violence, no theft, no fraud. Be honest, would you want to do business with someone who refuses to sign such a contract? Without a PeacePass, you cannot rent an apartment, no job, no bank account. And think about it, this is nothing new. Even today we need liability insurance to rent an apartment, drive a car, or do business. 3. The PeacePass is so affordable that just about everybody can pay for it. Remember, today, if you earn about 100,000 francs, you pay roughly 2,000 francs per year for security. And then you have another 30,000 francs in other taxes which do not exist on the OboxPlanet. On the OboxPlanet, security costs even less than 2,000 francs for the following 2 reasons. Because there is competition instead of state monopoly of police and justice, plus offenders pay for the damage they cause instead of creating further costs in prison. So we are talking about just a few francs per month, if anything at all. And if somebody is too poor to afford even this, there will be family, friends and charity. And even if this fails, there will be justice for uninsured people. We will explore this in the stories on the OboxPlanet. What exactly is contained in a PeacePass contract? It would likely include things like rights and responsibilities, liability insurance, compensation rules for damages, legal procedures, and penalties and fines. Let's start with rights and responsibilities. Rights are clear and simple. The insurance company protects the insured person both as a victim and as an accused. Responsibilities are also clear and common sense. The insured person commits to peaceful behavior and agrees to accept defined legal procedures and their outcomes. That means no theft, no violence, no aggression, no taking justice into your own hands. A key question in this context is, why can't violence be insured? Why can't robbers get an insurance for their aggressive actions? On a practical level, insurance companies cannot pay for the damage caused by criminals and protect those same criminals at the same time. They would just end up constantly paying out damages. A bit more theoretical is that I cannot insure things that I have under my own control. I cannot insure burning down my house, and the same reason goes for taking justice in my own hands, because both are under my control. Next point, liability insurance. We already know this today. It pays for damages in case of accidents and gives security to everyone involved. Next point, compensation rules for damages. Compensation works just like today. Property damage is replaced and injuries or death are compensated, all based on agreed contracts. For example, $2,000 monthly payment in case of a lost leg or $1 million in case of death. But here is a key difference. After paying compensation, the PeacePass gives the insurance company the right to find the offender and hold them accountable. And this is where things get interesting. The insurance company will now either search for the offender itself or hire others to do it. In a way, it's like putting out a reward for finding of the offender, the return of the headhunter, so to speak. Now, at this point, one question is sometimes raised. Without a state police, how much force is a private investigator allowed to use? The answer is simple. Only as much force as absolutely necessary. If an investigator uses more force than needed, he becomes an offender himself and can be held accountable in court. And the same applies for self-defense or when helping someone to defend themselves. Of course, there are gray areas. We will explore those in a bonus chapter. Now let's see what happens when a suspect is caught and found. And remember, what happens now is part of the contract, to which all PeacePass owners have agreed. Let's take the simple case where both the victim and the accused are insured with the same company. Then the case first goes to the legal department of the insurance company. The company makes a settlement proposal, and if both sides agree, the case is closed. Example: the neighbor's son is caught on a security camera walking out of the house with a stolen TV. The father will probably say tough luck. He returns the TV, pays the fine, and the case is closed. But if one side does not agree, the case goes to court, and then the question is, who chooses the court? It's actually quite simple. Every insurance company has a list of private courts and law firms that they trust, meaning courts that are good, affordable, and fair. And who decides what is good, affordable, and fair? The customers do. Because when customers choose their insurance company, these are precisely the important considerations: quality, price, and fairness. By the way, if one of the parties, either the victim or the accused, does not have an insurance, he still has the same options. He would simply need to pay for the process or finance it up front. But as we have seen above, no security insurance is extremely rare, but even this case can be handled without problems. Back to the dispute, which now goes to the first court. One of the parties, the victim or the accused, chooses a court from the security company's list. The court reviews the case and makes a decision. If both parties accept the decision, the case is closed. If they do not agree, the next step is that the other party chooses a different court from the insurance company's list. If there is still no agreement, there is usually a third and final step, as long as no new evidence appears. This, by the way, is quite similar to how things work on Earth today. And what keeps the courts fair? What makes it almost impossible to bribe or to corrupt the system? Just think about it. What happens to courts that make biased, poor decisions? Example: Court A repeatedly gives very different judgment than other courts. What happens next? The insurance company warns the court. If nothing improves, the court is removed from the list, and if the insurer does not act, customers will complain and ultimately switch to the competition. Result: courts must be fair or they lose business. Besides the competition, which is always looking for mistakes of their competitors, do people really follow and care about court decisions? Absolutely, and here is the reason. The media landscape is completely different from Earth. Imagine a world where the news never talks about politics, no wars, no power games, no elections. Instead, the news focuses on things people can judge and change, like safe streets and whether courts are fair. And on top of the list of people's interests is, of course, comparing, evaluating, and choosing the best security and justice provider. Now imagine if there is even a rumor that a rich client tries to bribe a court, it instantly becomes headline news. And if that court's ruling looks suspicious, everyone involved, the client, the court, the security company, could lose customers and face intense scrutiny from competitors. This pressure is precisely why competition gives companies a strong economic incentive to behave fairly. Now let's assume the ruling in our example is as follows. The son must return the TV, pay the court and legal costs, and pay an additional penalty equal to twice the value of the stolen item. Since the TV was worth 500 francs, this means an extra 1,000 francs penalty. This decision is remembered by customers and by the courts working with Zurich Safe. It becomes a guideline for similar cases, a precedent, like we know it from American movies. So, example, when somebody is found guilty of stealing an e-bike for 2,000 francs, he can expect to pay the costs plus 4,000 francs penalty unless there are some good reasons for increase or lowering the penalty. So far so simple when both parties are insured with the same company. But what happens if two parties are insured with different companies who have higher or lower fines? And what if these companies offer completely different law traditions and fines? The short answer is experience on Earth shows that widely differing law traditions can be managed quite well. On Earth there are 193 countries, each with its own legal system. In fact, there are hundreds of different legal traditions when we include regions, states and cantons, and they differ about as widely as we can imagine. And interestingly, today on Earth, there are not more conflicts between people from different countries than within the same country. So the key question is, how are these conflicts resolved? In private life, we know that the place where a conflict occurs determines which laws apply. If as a German I visit Saudi Arabia, Saudi law applies and vice versa. There are some international organizations which try to establish worldwide rules and laws, such as the courts in Den Haag and even the United Nations, but if states decide to ignore the ruling, there is little they can do. In business life, where we have lots of international contacts, business contracts simply define what happens in case of conflict. For example, a contract might include a clause like, place of jurisdiction is such and such. In other words, the rules are agreed in advance. As a matter of fact, international trade is a wonderful illustration that voluntary rules can function even without a central authority. People in Spain, the United States or Vietnam follow their own local laws at home, but when they trade with one another, they rely on agreed upon internationally accepted rules. And how are these rules enforced without a single authority above them, without a world state and world police force? Simply through market mechanisms. If someone behaves dishonestly, they simply stop getting business. These mechanisms also work on the OboxPlanet, with some interesting details which we will discuss in one of the bonus chapters. And here is the first word for the Hope Unplugged challenge, namely 0. Remember it and send it with the other 2 words from videos 3 and 4 to oboxplanet@gmail.com to get your free copy of the Hope Unplugged booklet. Offer valid until the end of 2026. Back to the OboxPlanet and penalties and fines. How severe are punishments on the OboxPlanet? Interestingly enough, fines and punishments tend to converge and become very similar per region and culture. Why is that? Because there are 2 natural limits to punishment. A lower limit, deterrence. Punishment must be strong enough to discourage crime. And the upper limit, self-protection, because punishment is not just a deterrence but also a risk. We will get into that in a moment. First, the lower limit. Most offenders make a risk calculation, consciously or not. They weigh the costs and benefits. What do I gain? What is the chance of getting caught? What happens if I'm caught? To put it bluntly, if my chances of getting caught are 99% and if I have to face a stiff penalty, it's different than if I have a 10% chance and get a slap on my hands for punishment. The result? Higher expected costs of a crime lead to fewer crimes. Now, different places tolerate different levels of crime, and some may need more or less punishment to deter it. But it is generally true that in a given place and in a given time, there is a certain level of minimal punishment that makes people feel safe. This level becomes the same for all security companies. There will still be impulsive or emotional crimes on the OboxPlanet, for example, crimes of passion or even extreme acts like mass violence. These cannot be prevented by punishment alone, because such acts are not based on rational thinking, but on emotions or irrational behavior. But no system can fully prevent them, neither on Earth nor on the OboxPlanet. So we have a minimum level for deterrence. Now it gets interesting. In a competitive system, the upper limit of punishment tends to move close to the lower limit. Why? Because punishment is not only a threat, it is also a risk. Imagine you can choose between two insurance companies. One punishes only as much as needed to keep crime low. The other adds a revenge factor and is unnecessarily harsh. Example. One company punishes theft with the double value of the stolen good. The other punishes the same theft by cutting off one hand. But here is the key point. If you choose the harsh company, you also accept the risk of that punishment happening to you. And this even in cases like mistakes, false accusations, or wrong judgments. So the question is, would you take that risk if not necessary? Why would you? For revenge? Sadism? In reality, apart from a few psychopaths and sadists, almost no one would choose that extra risk voluntarily. And still, we will take a look how even this could be handled in the last bonus chapter, just for fun. This leads to an important conclusion. In a competitive legal system, there are two limits, a lower limit set by efficiency and deterrence, and an upper limit set by self-protection, risk of error, and freedom of choice. And these two limits tend to lead to similar punishment traditions across different security firms. And because different insurance companies have similar legal principles and punishments, conflicts can be resolved easily. First, the accuser can choose from the court of the accused's insurance. If there is no agreement, the accused can choose a court of the accuser's insurance, and the final step is arbitration court chosen by both insurance companies. And remember, all courts and all insurance companies have a financial incentive to get a fair agreement as quickly as possible. For more serious cases, insurance companies have a list of specialized courts. Okay, you may say, this makes sense, but why should somebody accept the decisions of the courts with no police and to enforce it? Good question with an easy answer. Because you agree to respecting the verdicts of the courts when you sign the PeacePass. If you break the contract, you lose your PeacePass. That means no access to rental agreements, employment contracts, credit cards, bank accounts. In practice, this means exclusion from civilized life. It's like ostracism or even banishment. And these punishments are extremely powerful, often more effective than physical punishment could ever be. And now we get to the most interesting frequently asked questions in the next video.